Long shadows stretched across the park, painting the trees in hues of gold as Elijah Brooks, a 17-year-old black teenager, sat quietly on a bench near the fountain. His fingers absently scrolled through his phone. The park was serene, interrupted only by the occasional chirp of birds and distant laughter of children. It was a moment of solace for Elijah, a brief escape from a world that often felt heavy. But today, that moment was about to fracture. From the corner of his eye, Elijah noticed a woman briskly approaching. Her brown hair was tied tightly, and her expression was one of tense focus. She stopped a few feet away, briefly glancing at him before looking away. "I don't trust the look of him," she muttered, the words barely audible but loud enough for Elijah to hear. His stomach sank, his pulse quickened. It wasn't the first time he'd been judged, his presence misunderstood. He felt her eyes on him, her gaze carrying the weight of baseless accusation. Without warning, she pulled out her phone and dialed. "Yes, there's a black teenager sitting here in the park. He's been here for a while, and I don't know what he's doing. It feels suspicious." Her voice was steady, but the fear laced within it was unmistakable. Elijah sat frozen, his chest tightening. He'd done nothing wrong. He just wanted peace, a simple moment to himself. But that fragile peace was shattering, the sound of approaching sirens growing louder, closer. Elijah stood, his phone still in his hand, notifications flickering across the screen unnoticed. He braced himself for what he knew was coming. This was a scenario he had seen play out too many times, a misunderstanding spiraling into something far worse. The police car pulled up to the curb, its presence an ominous reminder of how quickly things could escalate. The officer stepped out, his hand instinctively resting near his holster. The woman who had called stood to the side, her finger pointed directly at Elijah. "That's him," she said, her voice edged with certainty. "He's been acting suspicious." The officer looked from the woman to Elijah, his eyes narrowing. "You got ID on you?" the officer asked, his tone flat but heavy with unspoken judgment. Elijah swallowed hard, pulling his wallet from his pocket with trembling hands. He handed over his ID, trying to stay calm, even though his heart raced. The officer scanned the ID, then looked back at him, his expression unreadable. "I'm going to need you to come with me," he said, reaching for Elijah's arm. Elijah didn't resist, but every fiber of his being wanted to scream that he'd done nothing wrong. His chest tightened further as the officer's grip firmed on his arm. Around them, onlookers watched, their whispers filling the air, but no one stepped forward. Then, cutting through the tension like a blade, a voice rang out. "Excuse me. What's going on here?" The officer froze. The woman who had called the police looked up, startled. Elijah turned toward the voice and saw a figure approaching, a woman whose presence radiated strength and authority. It was his aunt, Camille Brooks. Dressed in a sharp blazer, her steps purposeful, Camille carried herself with the confidence of someone who could shift the dynamic of any room. Her FBI badge was clipped to her waistband, glinting in the golden light. "Ma'am, did you call the police on my nephew?" Camille asked, her tone calm but steely. The woman stammered, her gaze flickering nervously between Camille and the officer. I wasn't sure what he was doing. He looked. What?" Camille interrupted, her voice firm. "Like he didn't belong, like he was a threat because of the color of his skin." The officer's posture stiffened, his grip loosening on Elijah's arm. The woman's face flushed, her confidence visibly crumbling under Camille's piercing gaze. "You've made a mistake," Camille continued, stepping closer. Next time, think twice before you assume the worst about someone just because they don't fit your biased expectations. The officer nodded stiffly, handing Elijah back his ID. He glanced at Camille's badge, clearly recognizing her authority, and retreated to his squad car. Camille turned to Elijah, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" Elijah nodded slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah. Thanks, Aunt Camille." As they walked away, Elijah's mind raced. Relief washed over him, but a question lingered: what if she hadn't been there? What if no one had come to stand up for him? Camille's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Next time, let us find a different park, okay?" Elijah managed a small smile. "Deal." This time, he walked away unscathed, but the moment left him with a deeper understanding of the world he lived in, a world that still had so much work to do.